So today's date is Saturday, May 31st, 2025. My name is Sarah Boye, and I'm interviewing Natalie Ford as part of research with the University of Central Florida's Riches Project in cooperation with the City of Orlando's Parramore Speaks project. This interview is being conducted at the Grand Avenue Neighborhood Center in Orlando, Florida, and Ms. Ford has agreed to allow this interview to be recorded. Ms. Ford, could you start us off by telling me your full name?
My name is Natalie J. Ford.
Can you tell me about your childhood and where you grew up?
I grew up in Clear Lake Cove, which is off of Tampa and Gore, I think, or on the backside of John Young Parkway.
Okay, when did your family first arrive in Orlando?
I was born and reared here, as
Okay.
was my father.
Okay, and how did your family come to this area?
Well, as I said, my dad was born and reared here. He married my mom, who is from South Carolina, and they moved here in 1962, I believe. I'm pretty sure, 1962. I was born in 1963.
Okay, and what did your parents do for a living?
They were both educators.
Okay, where did they were school teachers? Where did they teach?
They were school teachers. My mom taught at Holden Street Elementary, and then she taught at let me back up. She taught at Cocoa Beach High School, I believe, and then she came to Orange County Public Schools. My dad taught at Jones High School, and then when the deseg order was enforced, he was transferred to Winter Park High School. And then he left Winter Park High School and moved to, it was FTU, Florida Technical College, I think, or Florida Technical University. And then it became University of Central Florida, or UCF. And my mom retired from West Ridge Middle School.
Okay, you mentioned desegregation there. How did that impact your family? Do you have any memories of that?
Oh, I definitely do. So I started out my first year in first grade at Holden Street Elementary School, which was great because I went to school with my mom, although she was not my teacher, but I went to school with her. And then in December, that was in 1970, and that was when the deseg order was enforced. Teachers were shifted and moved, and when we came back in January, we had a new teacher who was not my teacher. And in first grade, you get really, connected to your teacher. You love your teacher. It's first grade. And so we had a new teacher who was not happy to be there. She was a young white woman, and we cried and cried and cried. And I will never forget this. She had enough. A, she didn't want to be there. B, she had all these little whiny 6-year-olds. And she told us, and I remember it like it was yesterday, and I didn't know what the word meant that she said, but I knew that it was not nice. And she said, "I do not want to be here with you little pickaninnies any more than you want me here, but we all have to make the best of a bad situation." And I was like, oh, okay. So, we sucked it up. And when I went home that day, as every day, my dad asked me, "How was your day?" I told him what the teacher said. And he and my mom looked at each other. And, he said, okay, asked me for, my homework. I gave him this list of things that we would need. And it was, crayons, glue sticks, scissors. And we were used to reading math, science, like little science experiments. And, maybe a couple hours later, he called me out from my room and asked me again what the teacher said. Now, decades later, I found out that my parents already knew that the exchange of teachers was going to happen. But he wanted to see if my story was going to change, and it did not. The next day, I did not go to school. The day after, I was transferred to Pine Hills Elementary to finish out the school year with the teacher that I had started with at Holden Street, which was Miss Bryant. The next year, I was moved to St. James Parochial School, and I went to private school from 2nd grade through 12th grade. I went to St. James from 2nd to 8th, and then Bishop Moore Catholic High School from 9th to 12th. And so that is the impact that the enforcement of the deseg order had on my life, because my parents, even though they were public school educators and caught a lot of flack for sending their children to private school, they were not going to sacrifice our educational experience, our the teaching that we received from teachers who did not want to teach us, for the sake of, yeah, we're public school educators, and so we're going to keep our children in public school. So that's the impact that it had on us.
Wow. All right. So what was your experience like in private school then?
2nd grade was an adjustment, because the majority of the students there had been with each other since kindergarten, but we were well accepted. Both my sister and I, we were both well accepted. We, you have your children bring from home the things that they are taught. So it wasn't until I got to 7th grade that I had somebody call me the N word, and it stung, but I talked everything over with my parents. I am grateful that I came from the home that I did, but it was the best thing that my parents could have done for me. I really believe that, because not only did we get a solid educational foundation, but because of the faith-based aspect of it, they dealt with whatever ugly societal issues that were going on. They dealt with it right away. So it was, I think, really, it was the best thing because of the times and the climate, which is very ironic, looking at the things that we deal with now. It really was the best thing that they could have done.
What was your favorite subject in school?
English and history.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
So in elementary school, I wanted to be a nurse, then I wanted to be a doctor. And then when I got to high school, I got into the drama club. And when I went to college, I became a Henderson Davis player, which is the theater. And I wanted to go to New York and do Broadway. But there was no American Idol, no America's Got Talent, none of that stuff back then. So my mother told me to get a real job, and that is how I ended up in education. I taught for 7 years, went to law school, loved criminal defense, but I eventually came back to education.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your career and what you do?
I am a public school educator, imagine that, following my parents. I have taught everything from middle school English to high school English. I am now the STEM coordinator at Lockhart Middle School. I've also coached women's basketball at the high school level. I have 4 state championships, yay. But education is where my passion is, because I see that this generation is lost. But I see a lot of my dad in myself. And my mom, it was not the path that she wanted to take, but because of the time in which she graduated college, that was pretty much the only job that professional blacks could get, was education. For my dad, that was his passion. Education was his passion, and I watched him change the lives of a lot of young men. I have a lot of former students who come back and tell me, "Oh, Dr. Ford, you changed my life, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, what? I thought you could not stand me. But I see a lot of my dad and myself in how I relate to students. I try to help them see the world beyond the classroom where they are right now. And my philosophy is education is either who you are or who you're not. And I see a lot of people in this profession for the weekends off and the summer off. And I think that that is a lot of what is wrong with education. People are not invested. I love what I do despite the lack of respect that educators get now. But I think that I chose this profession and this profession chose me. And it's in me. It's who I am.
Okay, so talking a little bit more about your family legacy and education, can you talk to me a bit about the Nat Ford School?
I absolutely can. I remember, so it goes back to the deseg order and how unfortunately schools in black neighborhoods were ultimately closed down because students in black neighborhoods were bused to more affluent area schools. And I used to always hear my father talk about how black students were not connected or invested in the schools where they were going because the schools did not sit in their neighborhoods, and so they would be bused hours, going and coming, and there was really no connection for the family or the student. It was just transporting them to a building, they'd get their lesson or education, and then they'd go back home. And there was nothing really for them. And he always talked about the importance of schools being in the neighborhoods. And so that's why it was so important to him that schools be near where students could have a connection to the school that was closest to them. And it means so much to me and my family that there is a school not only that serves the needs of the students closest or connected to them, but that bears his name, because he was a lifelong educator and he believed that the behavior issues or the challenges that students met started with the fact that there was not a school that the student could connect with or could see that there was relevance for them, that the school was not worried or had an interest in the life of that child. And so to have a school that bears his name, that carries on his legacy, that has the philosophies and the ideologies that he believed means absolutely everything.
And how did the school come about? I mean, ideologically, but actually, how did it happen?
So there was, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a petition for the school because originally it sat across from the downtown recreational center, which is where the Luminaries and Creative Village is now. But it was there because it sat in the heart of Parramore, and that's where he grew up. And so we petitioned the school board. My mom, myself, and some other community advocates went to a school board meeting and literally went with a petition to the school board to and expressed the importance and the need of a school for elementary aged students that focused on health and wellness, because that is a huge challenge for the black community, is health and wellness. We look at and we took statistics of diseases that plague the black community, like high blood pressure and diabetes and whatnot. And we talked about the need for, starting at the elementary level, to be able to educate the students. And we took information regarding the number of hours that they spend on a school bus being transported to elementary schools far outside of their neighborhood. And why not have a school where these students can have neighborhood pride in a school that addresses the needs for them in their neighborhoods where parents can be invested, where the students can say, hey, you see that school right there that they can literally walk by, like on the weekends? That's my school right there. And so that's literally how it started, was with a petition to the school board.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about entrepreneurship a bit. So I want you to think back to when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of businesses existed in the neighborhood?
So my best friend and I started a lawn service, which my dad was like, what? You can't do that. But we were determined. And so we knocked on doors. We asked the neighbors, hey, if we offered to cut your lawn for $10, would you let us? And they said yes. And so my father could not believe it, because I was a daddy's girl, and I was that girl who was going to do anything that the boys could do. And we literally like cut mowed lawns in our neighborhood for our neighbors. They couldn't believe it. The boys in the neighborhood could not believe it. And we did pretty good. We had lemonade stands. But there were also like legitimate businesses. There were barber shops. There were barbecue shops. I remember that there were clothing shops where you could, go and, buy outfits or whatever. And my father worked really hard to get a grocery store over on Bruton Boulevard, I believe it was. And there was also a pharmacy in the area.
And what kind of work did the people of Parramore do?
So so this is information that my father taught me, right? Because I was a history minor when I went to college. He told me that Parramore, this is where he grew up. He told me a lot about, how it came to be. But most of the people did domestic work. They cleaned houses for the white Orlandoans. But there were also dentists and doctors. I don't know if you are aware where Guardian Care is, but that used to be Dr. Phillips Hospital. That's where I was born, where Guardian Care nursing home is now. That's the hospital where I was born. But there were dentists, there were doctors over on South Street, South and Parramore is where Dr. Smith, that the Smith Center is named after. That is the doctor that delivered me. That's where my mom used to go for her OB visits. So there were OBGYNs, there were dentists, there were florists. People owned their own businesses in the Parramore area. There was a nightclub where black entertainers like Cap Calloway and Ella Fitzgerald, Ray Charles. My dad told me about a time when Ray Charles was supposed to come to town, but everybody knows the story of how he was strung out on drugs. He was too strung out, couldn't get it together, and so they got their refund. But entertainers of that caliber would come to the nightclub that was in the Parramore area over on South Street and entertain. So you name the profession, there were blacks who had their business.
And how has business and entrepreneurship in Parramore changed over time?
Because the neighborhood is not at the same caliber now that it was back when, like when my dad was a child or like a young adult, I see that it is a revitalization project, especially with the Kia Center there now. But it's rebuilding. It's definitely not where it was when my parents moved here after they married. I see people, like I see restaurants and I see different businesses that are moving into the area, but there are certain pockets of Parramore that definitely are struggling.
Okay, so now we're going to have our arts and crafts.
Okay.
So here we have this. Okay, and this is north, if that helps orient you, but you can turn it however you wish, and we've got different colors you can use.
Okay.
But what I want you to do is to define the boundaries of what you consider the Parramore community on the map.
Okay. Okay, I see division. Like just draw the line.
Yeah, however you'd like to do it. Some people go down streets, people circle it, it's,
Okay.
everyone's a little different.
So. mm, I know division.
All right. Do you want to talk about why you chose where you chose?
Okay, so I know that division separated, again, this is coming from my father. Division separated like the black side of town from like Lake Eola and like the white side of town. South Street, Jackson, Westmoreland, like all, Gore, all and Conley and Cypress, Long, all of this I know from growing up as a child. Lee Street, like these are streets that I know as a child from growing up. Carter Street, I know that there's a project like Lake Lorna Dune. This is the pocket that I know as being like where blacks like lived. There's churches. I know that I had family who lived like on some of these streets. The church that I attend. This is the area that I know as Parramore. I was looking for where my grandmother's, I didn't see Woods, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere. But this is what I know as Parramore.
Okay, so then thinking about community, what challenges did the community face in the past and how were they overcome?
Ooh, challenges. I don't know that, and I'm just talking about when maybe there were economic challenges, but I think as a community, because it was so close knit, I don't know that it was viewed as challenges so much as it is today, because everybody stuck together and everybody looked out for each other. I think that that is a challenge of today, is that people don't, and that's sad to me. I as a child, I know that I could have walked from my grandmother's house to wherever she would send me, and I would have been okay because people knew, oh, that's Ciola's granddaughter. And if I didn't make it within a certain amount of time, then a message would have been sent. Like the sense of, you said it perfectly, the sense of community within Parramore, which is amazing because we did not have internet, we did not have cell phones, but we didn't need them because there was that community connection where everybody was looking out for everybody. And so we didn't need this high tech that we have now. And I tell my students all the time how their lack of ability to communicate is the demise of their generation. the only challenge that I feel that Parramore had was economic and their lack of access to opportunity.
So you mentioned your church earlier. Shiloh Baptist Church has been a cornerstone in the Parramore community for over a century. So growing up, what role did the church play in your family's life and in shaping your father's approach to public service, and your mother's and yours?
So yeah, that's where I was born, baptized, everything. I'm sorry. The role that it played in his.
Well, we know it's been a factor in the community.
Correct.
But speaking from your family's perspective, what role did the church have in your family's life and in your family's public service?
Okay, so the church was, in the Black community, it was family church community. So the church provided a foundation of faith, and it offered a space where there was support. When my dad decided to run for office, it was a space where he could pull volunteers to help work on his campaign. It was a space where if he needed, campaign literature to go out, he could give it to people in the church, and then they would go and hand it out in their neighborhoods. It was a space where he could bounce ideas off of, the church community. It was a place where he could listen to the concerns, because you can't be everywhere at once. And so he would be able to meet with the people in the church, find out what their challenges, what their concerns are in their respective neighborhoods, and address those issues, find out what it was that was most pressing for them. For some people, it was what was going on in the schools. For other people, it was, crime in certain neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods were safer than others. For others, it was interaction with the police. I know, for example, he formed, it was a meeting where he would talk to police officers and tell them how to better interact with people in the neighborhood, like how to approach. Don't assume that every Black person that you encounter is a criminal or has criminal intent. I can't remember what it was that he called it. But he literally gave lessons on police interaction in the Black community, and that came from a concern that a church member gave him. So the church played a very vital role in his seeking political office, and his work in the church doing outreach helped him to see a different side of what was needed in different neighborhoods. Because if you're just out there, just political, there are other avenues, other people, from other lenses that you need to see. And the church gave him that avenue as a means to understand various lenses of concerns from people. And so it was very helpful.
Okay, so talk about your father's service a little bit more. So he was the cities of Orlando's first Black city commissioner.
For District 5.
For District 5. So what do you remember about how he approached leadership in Parramore and the values that he emphasized at home and how those translated to the city?
So he was a son of Parramore. He ran from his roots. Growing up in Parramore, the people really could relate to him. And it was important to him that there was a voice representing Blacks on the city council. He started the initiative for single member districting, which is something that the city did not have. And what I loved about him was he worked tirelessly on the campaign of Pappy Kennedy, who was the first black city commissioner, he worked on that campaign as though it were his own, with, knowing that it was not, that he was not going to be the one who was going to be elected, but his main goal was that there be a voice to represent the needs and concerns and challenges of just blacks in general. I remember his always instilling in us integrity. Integrity, integrity, integrity. And I say that because nationally, there was the Watergate scandal. There were scandals with like senators and presidents, and I just remember him always impressing upon us, telling the truth, making sure that that we were above reproach. And the thing that makes me most proud, aside from his work in the community, because he wanted to make sure that his neighborhood, the neighborhood that he grew up in, always had a voice, was always represented, but he was never in any scandal. There was never any kind of probe into any aspect of his life. And that was the thing that was most important to him. Yes, he wanted to represent his district, but he always wanted to make sure that everything that he did was above board and that it was honest and that there was never anything that was related to him with scandal. He said, and he would always tell us, if people cannot trust you with their most precious, most sacred part of who they are, then all the good that you do will be for nothing. And that is something that has always stuck with me. And that's the part of his legacy that makes me the most proud.
Okay, so let's look at his legacy a little bit. In what ways have you seen your father's work continue to shape opportunities or open doors for today's generation of community leaders and entrepreneurs and others in Parramore?
So I know I said that he left Winter Park and went to UCF, what is now UCF. And he was in charge of minority affairs out at UCF. He helped a lot of people at UCF with scholarships, with admission. He made sure that students who may not have otherwise had an opportunity, had an opportunity. I know that when he worked in City Hall, he made sure that there was equitable access for people who might not have had an opportunity to do so. If he knew someone, if someone was looking for a job and he knew someone in a particular area or at a particular company, he always reached out and connected people whenever, wherever he could. The whole philosophy of Barack Obama when he says, you reach back and pull someone through, that was my father. I have so many people who come up to me and said, hey, your dad is the one who, gave me the opportunity, and that's why I'm in the job that I'm in today. We don't have enough of that. We have so many people who, they get their start, they get their job, and then they shut off. They don't, it's like, I've got mine, I'm good, and we need more giving back. And that is something that I watched my father do. I watched him make phone calls to different colleges and get football or basketball scholarships for students. And that is how I see his legacy continuing to move forward. People who are now in successful positions, who were able to go to college and get their degree, and now they have a job or a career. It began with my father giving them the opportunity or connecting them with the person that they needed to be connected with in order to get that first start and move forward.
We talked a lot about challenges in the past, but what challenges does Parramore face in the present day?
Ooh. I think the mindset of a lot of people in Parramore has shifted to one of, and people might not like this, but I have to call it like I see it, like my dad used to. it has to shift from one of handout to what can I do to work to help myself. Yes, things are challenging, but they've always been challenging. But I think the difference between in the past and today is that people looked for ways to help improve themselves instead of waiting on handouts. And I know that there are lots of, roadblocks and challenges. However, I think that the best way to overcome obstacles is to figure out a plan, work towards fulfilling that plan, and stop waiting for someone to just hand things to you. My dad grew up in a time where nothing was given. Everything had to be earned. And he always told us the one thing that no one can ever take from you is the education that you get. And I just see a lot of people waiting for things to be handed, and that's not the path. Because if it's handed to you, then it can be taken away from you. But the education, and I think maybe that's one reason that I'm so passionate about education, and I tell my students all the time, what you put up here, nobody can take away from you. The harder you work, the higher you will climb. And so I see a lot of people just waiting on, give it to me. No, you have to go out, work, and get it for yourself. And that way, whatever you do gain, no one will be able to take it from you. So I think the challenges that people face today that I see is a lot of, this is owed to me, I'm entitled to. No, nobody is entitled to anything. Everything that people have that you may see, it's because they have worked for it. And I don't think that we have enough of that today.
Okay, so how can residents of Parramore get more involved in the community?
They have to show up. They have to show up to meetings. That's what my dad did. He showed up to meetings and got, literally got involved in community outreach. If there's a problem, show up to school board meetings, show up to city council meetings, county council meetings. You can't just sit back and complain. You have to get involved. My dad always told me, if you're not a part of the solution, then you're a part of the problem. So you have to be present in order to know what policies are in place and make your voice heard. Volunteer to be on boards, to put your hands in and actually do some work. And then who knows, maybe you can make a difference. Maybe you can work to make things better. But sitting at home, waiting on change, that's not how it happens. I watched my dad serve on numerous community advisory boards before he ever ran for office. He did not just, sit around and then one day, hey, I'm gonna run for office. No, before he started his push for single member districting, he served on numerous community boards and realized, hey, we don't have any representation. We don't have anyone speaking out for what our community needs. And so it was literally after years of being on various boards that he decided, I'm gonna petition for this. And then even when he did, he was not the one who ran. So there has to be strategy, there has to be plans in place, but before you can do that, you need to volunteer, you need to get out there and make your voice heard.
And how best can Orlandoans outside of the Parramore community help support Parramore?
Talk to the residents. You cannot be afraid. We cannot be afraid to talk to each other because we're all just people. I know that sounds real corny because the John Legend song just came to my mind. We're all just ordinary people, but you can't be afraid to talk to people and find out what the needs are. Is everybody going to be approachable? Is everybody going to be, amenable to what it is that you have to say? Absolutely not. But and if you're not good at talking to people, ride the neighborhood and see where the shortfalls are. But don't stand back and say, oh, that neighborhood over there. No, it's one Orlando. And when one suffers, then we all suffer. Ride around, and if you don't want to talk to people, because some people do look kind of sketchy, but you can't talk about how bad an area is if you're not willing to give a helping hand and see what changes, what modifications, what can be done to make any area better. Parramore has a lot of history, a lot of heritage in it, and working together we can all build it up.
So what is Parramore's legacy?
I know that I don't know if a lot of people know that Parramore was named after the 14th mayor of Orlando. So it has a lot of history, a lot of legacy with respect to that. It has a legacy of affluent and hardworking Black people. I think that we're caught up today in the poverty that plagues Parramore. But I think that we can get Parramore back to what it used to be if we work together and revitalize what Parramore used to be. It can once again be a place that's not just surviving, but actually thriving, because we have a lot of potential with the sports arenas, with the incoming businesses. The legacy can be one of optimism, potential, and opportunity.
Okay. What does Parramore mean to you?
It's my dad. It is my dad. It's where he started, it's what he fought for, and it's where he still lives.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered?
No, I just, want to make sure that all that he did to represent and fight for in the Parramore community was not in vain.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.